All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Riddoch Arts and Cultural Centre. We are here for the Artist Talk with Luke Pellen. Yay! My name is Kyra. I'm a exhibition and events support officer here at the Riddoch, and I helped hang up all the works that you see here, along with my co-worker Jaquaya, who is legendary in this field. So shout outs to her. She's not here at the moment. But before we get started, I think it's important that we acknowledge country. So I'd just like to acknowledge that we are meeting here today on Bowen Dick country and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and recognise their deep attachment to the land, air and sea in which we meet on today, and recognise that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So a little bit of a vibe check. How are we feeling in the room today, everyone? Feeling good? Yeah. Ready to find out about all this awesome wild art you see around you. There's a lot of colours, there's a lot of surrealism, so we're going to have a bit of a chat with Luke about how all this comes together, and it should be quite interesting. So firstly, let's celebrate the work that is Electric Sheep here at the Riddoch, and I would love, Luke, if you could firstly just tell us a little bit about yourself, tell us where you're from and your artistic background.
Okay. Well, originally from Adelaide, actually, but I've been here long enough that I think I'm a local, 25 years or something like that. I have a pretty eclectic arts background, and I keep myself busy and interested in a few things like writing and acting and theatre, and a bit of stand-up comedy and music, and art, of course. But I also have a background in programming, as well as digital art, as well as traditional art. So I'm happy with a pen and paper and lesser degree to with a paintbrush and some oils, but I'll give that a go. But I really enjoy digital art. It sort of exercises a different part of the brain, and with the programming aspect, that's what we call these days generative art. We can generate things that's a bit more mathematical, a bit more programmatic. And I have a formal background in computer programming, computer science, and also psychology. So they kind of come together with artificial intelligence and cognitive science. And I've always been interested in artificial intelligence. And I was writing chatbots on the Commodore 64 when I was probably about 11 or something. They weren't terribly advanced, but they were fun. As you can see, things have advanced a little bit since then. Yeah, just slightly. So yeah, that's a bit about my background.
Wow, so it sounds like a lot has sort of gone in eclectically over the years to sort of pull together what we see now. Have you exhibited works before like this?
Only one other exhibit, and that was at the Riddoch, and that was in my younger days. That was in about 1997. And I did surrealism and collage, so that was good old traditional cut and paste physical with scissors, and that's really good fun. I like that. And this is kind of the 21st century version of collage. But it's, as we'll talk about, I guess, it's not Photoshop style cut and paste. That's not what AI is. It's more like a soup. It's more like it's looked at hundreds of millions of images and analysed them. Nowhere in its brain, so to speak, does it have any of the images it's seen. So it only has the analysis of the images. So that's just sort of important to remember, because there's a lot of fear around new technology and fear about copyrights and this sort of thing. But it's essentially no different than a human studying artwork, except this computer has a super fast brain and is able to look at hundreds of millions, if not billions, of images.
Wow. So before we get into that...
Yeah. So stop me if I sidetrack.
No, that's fine. I just feel like there's a lot to unpack with this AI craziness. My brain is already losing it. But before we get into that, I think as a digital artist, there must be, a lot of things to be aware of when transferring, your works from screen to a physical form like we see here in the gallery today. Can you just sort of talk through the process of how you do that?
Okay, well, so this is kind of a collaboration of me and AI, which we'll talk about, and also a bit of a collaboration with my friend who's quietly sitting over here, John Baisley, and he was, we met each other through some other arts gig here, and he liked my work and I liked his work, and he's very much into the printing side of things and photography, so we met up. And we did basically a lot of this sort of printing together. We met up and talked about it, or we had online sessions where we discussed the images and discussed the sort of printing techniques and the paper that we would use and all of that sort of stuff. But I did make a conscious decision to want printed works. And I was, going to talk about screens. Of course, I've done some animations, so I decided to put some screens up. But I thought there was a nice juxtaposition with using the latest, greatest technology, but because we are seeing things on screens a lot, I really wanted to bring it back and kind of ground it and turn it into physical works. And again, part of that, we can talk about how AI has changed, is that the images that AI produced I thought were very, very painterly. They're not as clean, crisp as your usual digital images. There's a couple of exceptions to that, in that this image here and this large one back here, they're actually produced by my own custom algorithms. So they look slightly different quality, they have a different, much higher resolution. But what happened is I was exploring this technique and then I got hooked into the AI.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So obviously having an AI be a collaborator isn't, your average situation. So yeah, would you like to sort of break down how you do that and how that sort of comes together? Because I'm ready to know.
About the collaboration side particularly?
Yeah.
Okay, I hope you can hear me all right, by the way. I've been a bit croaky for a couple of weeks. But the collaboration side, that seems to be the way that we're heading. We sort of talk about collaboration. But already this stuff changes so quick that I can see it being absorbed in the culture and absorbed in society. That's already happening to the point that in this day and age you wouldn't put a collaboration with Adobe Illustrator or a collaboration with Photoshop. I feel like we're going to quickly get over this once people have some understanding of what this is. But the collaboration aspect is to do with the key workings of the AI. So there's a few things which I won't talk about now, but the key thing which I'll have to mention is the text to image. And this is the interface that has gone crazy in the last couple of years, and you may have seen it. And that is, it's pretty wild if you've never seen it or never heard of it. And that is, you literally type in what you want to see. It's as simple as that. You type in, I want to see a fish on a plate. There's a fish on a plate. Now, I'm making it seem a lot easier than it is, because there are other parameters and other things you can do. But with the AI, I liken it a lot to photography. And photography involves curating images and producing a lot of images and chucking a lot of images away. And that's AI collaboration is like. Sometimes it's not collaboration, sometimes it's wrestling. Sometimes you're wrestling with the thing, trying to get something out of it. So it helps to be a little bit flexible and a bit opportunistic as you explore this AI realm And just the exploration aspect alone, as I say, is rather like photography. You could sit down, rather than taking 100 photos, I may have made 100 images of each one of these images that you see, and 90% of them I went, no, they don't work. And then like photography, the ones that do work, I go, okay, what needs to be done to improve them? And that's where the artist comes in. So you'll retouch, you'll edit, you'll tone, colour, all that sort of stuff, the usual digital kind of workflow.
It's very interesting. So you sort of mentioned that the AI has sort of studied the classics. Do you sort of tell it what to do for homework, or do you?
For homework.
How does that come about?
Well, they're pre-trained because the amount of computing power you need is insane. I think the latest one kind of took about 2 months on the equivalent of about 1,000 top-of-the-range graphics cards. So I won't be doing that because I don't have 1,000 top-of-the-range graphics cards. But the interesting thing is, so this is like giving it a really good general understanding, especially when it's looking at 100 million or literally billions of images. You're getting a pretty wide spectrum of stuff. But the latest AI, which is Stable Diffusion AI, there's a few around, is exciting because it's open source. They're essentially releasing it free, although there are also commercial applications of it which you would pay for. But they're also opening it up to the idea of enhancing that network, that software, and training it yourself. So you can, or will be able to in the near future, tweak your own AI to your likings and train it on particular type of images. Obviously, if you're talking in the realm of hundreds of millions of images, you need some pretty clever software to kind of, assimilate all of the information that you want. But that's the gist of it.
So this kind of software, is this, accessible to the average person, or is this just like next level elite business that we can't just pop down to Harvey's and grab?
Well, I mean, that's the fascinating thing. It has been almost a year to the day that I've got into this AI stuff, and already it's at the point that it's not completely unusual. I mean, I don't know if I could get a show of hands as to anyone here who is familiar with the idea of text-to-image and AI. There you go, see? A year ago, which a long time in technology, short time for humans. A year ago, I don't think anyone would have put their hands up, and it was completely freaking people out, and it's completely freaking people out now because they're starting to see it and understand it. And that was the other thing. So a year ago, I outlaid a lot of money on very expensive hardware to be at the cutting edge. Now, there's commercial applications that run on servers, so even if your machine isn't particularly powerful, you can log into an application and use it. And when I was generating images a year ago, they were lower resolution, they were worse, and they took hours. Now, then they took minutes, now they take seconds.
Wow.
In the realm of sort of 30 seconds. But again, I encourage you to think about this kind of in terms of photography, where these days everyone carries a camera, everyone takes photos, everyone can take millions of photos, but not everyone calls themselves a photographer because there's a bit more effort involved in doing that. But it's exciting that this is essentially being brought to the masses, and I think, although people are scared of tech, I think it's going to open up a huge floodgates of creativity, especially for certain people who are going to feel liberated because they're frustrated that they may not think of themselves as an artist or as trained in that regard. And so the people who are more literarily minded are going to be crafting sentences and words. And I've only seen this technology getting better in the sense of, you can imagine crafting short stories and having the AI break it down and give you comic strip style breakdown or whatever. The future's going to be pretty crazy.
crazy.
Yeah.
No, that's really cool. Thank you. Yeah, it sounds like it's just, moving faster than ever before, which, technology always does move really fast, and you blink and you've missed it.
Yeah.
So in terms of in investing in your craft, have you had many moments of putting down some money and then going, 2 minutes later, you're out of date?
Yes. Well, there was that when I spent lots of money on a new computer. This was probably a year and a half ago. And I got kind of top of the line at the stage. And then within a few months, I think I upgraded the CPU. So I gave it an upgrade after it already got the best I could get. And then I upgraded the graphics card, which was very expensive. But graphics cards use parallel processing, so they're good at doing lots of small operations simultaneously. And this works for AI, which is run on what's called neural networks, which is a very simplified way of representing the brain. You have neurons, and neurons excite or inhibit other neurons, and they spread through the network. So your traditional computer has a CPU and it has memory. You have your process and you have the storage. A neural network kind of has the storage and the processing mixed together in the neurons. The neurons themselves contain the information.
Great. So obviously you sort of said that it's gone from creating images within hours to seconds. In terms of time that we see in this space, what are the hours or minute count?
Yeah, okay. Well, again, this is a bit like photography and a bit like digital art, and I guess in a sense it's a bit like real art, where there's no obvious, short, sharp answer to that. So like I say, I have a kind of photography style workflow. So creating images, we know the images can be created very fast, but you can spend a lot of time trying to figure out assorted parameters that you want to tweak, which control kind of line, colour, and these sort of traditional aspects, as well as the text prompt. But there are other things that they can do too, which I really like. And some of these functions will become more universal. But for example, you can actually get an AI to kind of meditate upon and dream about an input image. So some of my art is kind of multi-level in that I've taken existing art, given it to the AI, given it some other prompts and some other information, and then told it to go ahead and dream some scenarios about that. So it gets quite multi-level, and we're all experimenting in this field of AI. A lot of the techniques, artists these days are a little bit quiet about it. It's like their secret sauce. They don't really talk about exactly how they make it work or what they do. But this is like any digital workflow. So, each image you see here, minimum, would take hours. But as we know, the generation process has become very fast, so that helps. But, they might take days or more than that. I might come back to them, I might dig them out. As I say, curation is a big part. So you have a lot of images to sift through. Then when you find the best, you've got to edit, you've got to repaint, you've got to do all that kind of photography work too. So yeah, a lot like traditional digital art. So I would still use things like Lightroom, Photoshop, perhaps Illustrator, things like that on these images here. And as I say, that's usually the big difference, because people who are accessing it are just having fun and going, an exploding spaceship, bang, look at that, that's pretty cool. And it is pretty cool, but you'll get good results, but if you want great results, you have to put in a lot more time.
Very cool. So when we are looking at Electric Sheep, we see a lot of surrealism, a lot of out there sort of colours and shapes. What are some of your influences when it comes to these sort of wild images we're seeing?
Well, as I say, surrealism is a big influence of mine. I've always liked surrealism. And in the 90s, I was part of a surrealist group in Minneapolis. Over the internet, we're talking in the good old days in the 90s when it was predominantly huge text. That's right, huge text chats. But I'm drawn to fantasy and science fiction, of course, I like them, but also the surreal, the odd, maybe kind of outsider art, that sort of thing. So I'm pretty eclectic, and that also helps with the generation of AI images. Shall I talk about that a little bit?
Go for it.
And that is with this text-to-image component, which is the big thing. You can control content as well as style. So we've talked about content, so I could say a fish on a plate. You can go as deep as you want. You can say a fish on an 18th century China blue plate. The fish is a mackerel. There is a white light overhead taken with a Sigma 35mm lens f1.4 Kodachrome colour film. You don't want to say this is crazy, yeah? And the thing is, it's not explicitly, the AI isn't explicitly taught about these things. It just knows from looking at hundreds of billions of images that, hey, these were all classified as this type of lens, or these were classified as this type of lens, and just from that, it emulates the look. So that's crazy stuff. So a lot of people, for example, use 3D modelers in their prompts just to get it to look a bit cleaner and a bit CG. And again, this is where we enter the realm of sorcery and magic. Some people have their particular special source prompts that they don't like to share, which I think is a little bit ridiculous, but I mean, like, trending on ArtStation is one that's almost become a joke now. So everyone writes whatever, trending on ArtStation, in the hope that means it'll look better. But as I say, there's more to it than just a text-to-image. It's just that's the most mind-blowing component of all this.
Yeah, wow. The detail is incredible. Wow. And so in the room we have each of the sort of works split into different narratives. Would you like to briefly just touch on each of these narratives and how they sort of come about? Was it a natural thing, or did you specifically curate?
Okay, well, this is the interesting bit. I'm fairly improvisational too in a lot of like art, music, acting, that sort of thing. I like the improvisational, creative component of things. So what I did initially was just do lots of work, and then I had to hone it down and find what I thought was kind of a good mix, a good general selection, something that most people like, but yeah, give it a good mix. And when I came down to the space here and we started actually installing it early this week, that was when I really decided on the structure, and then I kind of came up with this structure here. So this structural part here has really only just been this last week of work. All the images were there, and then the poetry I decided to add again. It's because of this surrealist bent I have. I like kind of being evocative, and that's really what the poetry is for. And it's also because the poetry is itself another AI collaboration. Now, I think AIs are better at images than poetry, but it's still a fun exercise. So the poetry is essentially written by a computer, but also sort of written by me, because what you do is you can prompt the computer, so I can start with a line or a thought and it'll output stuff. And once again, like photography, this is just like writing. You do a lot of editing, a lot of chucking away, looking for nice things. And so all of this exhibition layout itself was kind of another step. That was the step that I took this week. And the step before that was, a year's worth of getting right into the AIs, the working of the AI and the images.
It sort of made me think about Google Translate, how wrong that is. Would you say that it's kind of comedic sometimes what the poetry would happen with the AI?
Yes. I mean, you can, for example, it can go. I mean, computers have always done this. You can get itself in a stupid loop. So I might say, let's, get some poetry about this fish on the plate. I don't like you coming back to the fish on the plate. But, and it might write some stuff and then say, there's a fish on a plate, there's a fish on a plate, there's a fish on a plate, there's a fish on a plate. And literally just write that 100 times and you think, I won't keep that.
I'm pretty sure repetition is a technique in poetry, so it's technically right. So now that you're in the space, the work is up, we've got the screens going, how does it feel to see the complete show in the space at the Riddoch?
Feels great. Feels really good. So thank you to everyone at the Riddoch and all the people that helped out with this. As I say, it was interesting because I've had a lot of experience in the arts, but not much in exhibition. So I'm happy that they're staying on the wall because I did all the framing and all of the D-rings and all that kind of technical stuff. But like I say, I made a deliberate decision to want to see things in a physical sense. I thought it was a really nice juxtaposition between this latest, greatest technology, but being able to see it as if it's a painting or a photo. And I'm happy with how they turn out because, like I say, resolution was. It looks, these are good sizes, but resolution was a little bit of an image in the beginning, and I had to use other AI tools, which are upscalers, which will increase the resolution and interpolate and try and make it look as good as the original. So resolution's always been an option because compared to photography, which has crazy resolutions, really, these things now. The latest AI does say 512 by 512 pixels, or 1024 by 1024 is really, really, really pushing it. And that's not very big if you know your resolutions.
Would you say that's definitely one of the main challenges?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, well, eventually, I mean, I think I've done well with the larger images here, but one of my broader goals was actually to pursue AI. Does that mean to pursue AI and to get bigger and bigger and bigger images? I'd love to do a huge AI, image or AI collaboration image, and no doubt, the technology changes so fast we'll do that. I mean, you can still do it now, it's just a bit harder, a bit messier. You might have to kind of cut an image into sections and play with it like that. It's all a bit primitive, but things will change and advance.
So we can definitely expect to see more of this type of work in the future from you?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, I'm quite enjoying it. It's quite a journey. It's interesting because, like I say, I think we are literally just right now seem to be at the point of this stuff, or even a month ago, this stuff exploding onto the scene. So a lot of you are probably familiar with it, and if you're not familiar with it, you've probably seen a lot of stuff and not realised it, because it does have an otherworldly quality. It is a bit unsettling, like the look of the AI. So, for example, I talk about how you would edit these images. If you don't, you could generate an image. I'm trying to look for, like a portrait or something, and the AI will have no problem giving this person an extra appendage. Putting an eye out the top of his head, or doing all this stuff, having wonky horizons that don't match. So, unless you filter out and fix these things, you know, they look a bit odd and they look wrong. So.
Yeah, I do recall seeing the boom happen on social media with one particular sort of generator and sort of having a play with things like Buzz Lightyear eating power tools or Shrek drinking a beer. And it's quite funny to see, you know, beers coming out of one shoulder and the other.
That's right.
So it is quite interesting. And if you can find it, definitely have a play, and then you can have a bit of an understanding of how this sort of all happens and works.
I was going to say a lot of them come out like conceptual art. So they come out very loose and sort of scribbly, and so as a thumbnail or at a glance, you think that's really good, and then you look at it closer and you go, oh yeah, he's got things coming out of his head, and he's got extra limbs and all that.
It's great. So, in terms of, you know, budding artists wanting to look into this field, or even just digital art in general, what kind of advice or pump up words can you give people either in the room or watching at home to have a crack?
Well, like, I guess, have a exploratory nature and embrace it. I mean, this is really cutting edge stuff. But as I say, it's amazing how quick it changes. So a year ago, it was cutting edge to the point of I had to invest a lot of money to be able to do it. No one knew what I was talking about, you know, and then a year later, it's essentially mainstream. As I say, if you're interested in this stuff, there are ways to run it on your home computer, and now there are ways to run it on your home computer with a fairly standard graphics card, not a ludicrously expensive graphics card like I have. So they've already tweaked all of this stuff. There's also a couple of services out there now, like Darling and Midjourney, which you may have heard of, which you can subscribe to and produce things on there. But as I say, if you have the Nows, you can actually get stuff working on your own machine and do it for nothing. And then as time progressed, the servers got really good, and I was like, oh, I don't need an expensive computer so much these days. But now it's kind of flipped around again, where the algorithms and the software is so good that it's like, oh, it is actually good having my own machine. And there's another aspect to this, which is a really tricky one, and that's really censorship. Now, not that I like, well, I do like making weird, far-out stuff, okay, but if you go through a server, if you go through some other system, they will censor your output and censor your prompts. And it's some ways it's reasonable, but I'm not a fan, and that's why ultimately I like to have it set up on my own machine so I have full control.
Yeah.
And also having a programming background, it means I can get a bit more in depth with the parameters and the control over it. The commercial products, you have a lot less control. They're still fantastic, and you'll see that's the main shift that you'll probably see in the exhibit, is the early stuff and the stuff that I like doing on my own machine will look a lot more painterly and sometimes a bit more abstract, but you'll see the odd images that look just about photorealistic, and they're probably done with the later ones like Darling or Midjourney, which are really good at doing that. But it's, it's whatever turns on. There's a lot of things out there to explore, and it's available now. You just have to kind of dig around for it. And if you don't, I imagine within 6 months to a year, it'll just be old hat. You'll be able to find stuff and play with stuff very easily. So it'll be interesting.
Great. Well, I think the perfect way to start exploring this is to come on down to the Riddoch and check out Electric Sheep by Luke Pellen and enjoy the works on the screens and also printed. Is there anything you would like to say to encourage people to come down and have a squeeze?
Please come down. As I say, If you're new to this or you're not sure what all this is about in terms of AI-generated art or collaborative art, as we like to call it, because we like to take some credit too, then I recommend you come down to have a look, because it will be stuff that will probably surprise you. Yes.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me and having a chat about everything that is Electric Sheep. And
thank
you everyone for being here, and thanks to everyone for tuning in. And enjoy the artworks. Thank you.